Okay, I want to start today with a little thought experiment. If I asked you to close your eyes and picture a great leader, someone who really changed things, or a CEO who turned a huge company around, what's the first image that pops into your head?
Oh, for most people, I think it's the person on stage.
Right.
The spotlight's on them, they've got the microphone, maybe they're pounding the podium, rallying the troops with some incredible charismatic speech. It's General Patton or Steve Jobs at a keynote.
Exactly. We're sort of culturally conditioned to believe that leadership is all about output. It's about transmission. If you aren't broadcasting, you aren't really leading.
But the research we're looking at today suggests that we might have that equation completely
And
backward.
that the great order thing might actually be a liability.
You might be, yeah. We are looking at what is often called the Gordian knot of leadership today, a skill that is, well, it's incredibly difficult to untangle, but absolutely essential to solve. We are talking about listening with intent.
And I want to be really clear right from the start. This isn't just about, being a good listener, so people like you. We are talking about listening as a hard strategic asset.
Hmm.
To guide us through this, we're doing a deep dive into the work of Fay Niewiadomski.
Faye is a real heavy hitter in this space. She's the author of the book Decisions That Matter, Rethink, Reimagine, Reset Your Life. And the core argument she makes is that our collective inability to listen is causing what she calls deaf leadership.
And deaf leadership isn't just, annoying for the team. It is incredibly expensive. We are talking billion-dollar
Very
disasters.
literally.
So our mission today is to figure out why listening is the, quote, orphan of business skills, dissect the specific barriers that stop smart people from hearing the truth, and maybe figure out how to earn this theoretical listening leader award.
It's a fascinating pivot, moving from the leader as the hero to the leader as the learner.
So let's get into it. Faye opens her argument with a scene she actually observed firsthand. It's a board meeting, high stakes, serious people. And she's watching the dynamic in the room, and she clocks something she calls the 80-20 rule.
And this is not the good 80-20 rule.
Not the Pareto principle, no.
No, this is more like the ego principle.
Hmm.
They notice that the CEO, he spoke for 80% of the time, and then he graciously allowed the rest of the board, all these highly paid, intelligent experts, to speak for the remaining 20%.
Okay, but I want to push on that for a second, on the definition of listening, because
Mhm.
technically during that 20% of the time, the CEO's mouth was closed. So wasn't he listening?
And that is the trap. Faye makes a critical distinction here. She says, and I'm quoting, "Notice I didn't say he listened for 20% of the time."
Uh,
Physical silence does not equal mental engagement. And that 20%, that CEO is probably just reloading.
Reloading, I like that. It sounds aggressive.
Well, it is in a way. You know the feeling. You're not actually absorbing what the other person is saying. You're just waiting for a gap so you can fire off your next point.
Or you're just judging what they're saying against what you already believe.
Right. That's not listening. That's just pausing your broadcast.
So the meeting ends, and Faye decides to test this theory. She gets a moment alone with his CEO. She asked for permission to ask a question, which is a really smart move. And then she basically drops a grenade.
What'd she ask?
She asks, when was the last time that you were absolutely wrong about something?
Wow. That is such a powerful question. It bypasses the right and goes straight for the ego.
And the reaction?
Well, silence. But Faye describes it as a long and uncomfortable silence. You can just picture him, searching the memory banks for a moment of vulnerability, and he comes up empty. Finally, he just admits, I can't remember.
I can't remember. Now, I think some people might hear that and think, wow, this guy's amazing. He's never wrong.
But that is exactly the wrong way to read it. If you are operating in a complex world and you can't remember being wrong, it doesn't mean you're perfect.
It means you're insulated.
Exactly. It means you're not getting any data that contradicts your internal map of reality.
Faye has this quote that I underline like 3 times. When you are speaking, you are not learning.
It's so simple, but it's the fundamental law of information flow, isn't it? When you speak, you're outputting what you already know. You're just reaffirming your current database. The only way to update that database is to stop transmitting and start receiving.
But nobody gives a standing ovation for receiving.
That's the problem. We reward the performance. We reward the output. But in that boardroom, the person who learned the absolute least was the CEO. He walked out with the exact same information he walked in with. That is a massive strategic disadvantage.
And this leads us to a metaphor Faye uses that really frames the stakes. We've all heard that saying, success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan.
Sure. When things go well, everyone wants credit. When they go badly, everyone runs for the hills.
So Fay flips this. She says that in the business world today, listening is the orphan.
Wow. That's a pretty harsh assessment. What's her evidence for that?
It's the data. She points out that while there are hundreds of research papers confirming that most leaders are, frankly, terrible listeners, we do almost nothing about it. She cites a statistic that less than 2% of leaders have had any formal training on listening with intent.
2%. That's basically a rounding error. It's nothing.
Think about it. We send leaders to negotiation training, public speaking, media training, but listening. We just treat it like breathing. We assume because you have ears, you know how to use them.
Right. It's treated as a passive biological function, not an active professional skill. We confuse hearing with listening, but hearing is just physics. It's sound waves. Listening is the decoding part. It's the meaning.
And to show the danger of confusing those two, Faye tells this story about a 3-year-old boy named Johnny. And I should warn you, listening, this one's a bit of a gut punch, but it makes the point perfectly.
It really does. It's a perfect illustration of the GI Go principle.
So the scene is, normal day at home. Little Johnny runs up to his mom. He says, Mommy, there's a fire in the kitchen.
Okay, now, just pause right there. Put yourself in the mom's shoes for a second. You're busy, maybe you're on a work call, and your 3-year-old, who has a wild imagination, comes in shouting. What's your first reaction?
You filter it. You check the source credibility. And the source is a toddler who probably just told you a dragon was in the bathtub 5 minutes ago. So the mom just says, "Oh, stop making up stories, Johnny," and shoos him away.
She dismisses the input because of the source. She just filters it out as noise.
The result: that night, the family is sleeping at Grandma's house because their home is fire-scorched. The kitchen was, in fact, on fire.
And this is GI Go in action. Garbage in, garbage out. In any system, and decision-making is a system, the quality of your output, your decision, can never be better than the quality of your input, your data.
So the mom treated the input as garbage because it came from a 3-year-old.
Precisely. Fay writes, even 3-year-olds can have valuable information. When we fail to listen with intent, we corrupt our own data stream. We end up with what she calls missing, misunderstood, manipulated, or misdirected input.
And you just cannot make a good decision based on corrupted data. Doesn't matter how smart you are. If the inputs are bad, the decision will be bad.
Exactly right. If that mom had just taken a second to verify the input, just to walk to the kitchen and look, she saves the house. Listening is data verification.
Okay, so if the stakes are literally saving the house or the company, why are we so bad at this? Why is that listening orphan still sitting there all alone? Is it just laziness?
It's deeper than that. Fay identifies 3 specific barriers, she calls them interferences, that jam the signal. And honestly, reading them, they're very common traits in, high achievers.
Let's go through them. Barrier number 1.
Leadership personality type. Think about the psychological profile of someone who gets to the C-suite. They're usually type A, driven, results-oriented, and fast.
Fay uses the word impatience.
Right, but it's an impatience that comes from a desire for efficiency. These leaders have this little voice in their head that's always saying, get to the point, I already know this, next slide. They value speed over depth.
I can definitely relate to that. You feel like you're saving time by cutting people off, but what you're really doing is cutting off the data.
Exactly. That internal judging voice is louder than the external one you're supposed to be listening to.
Okay, so what's barrier number 2?
Hubris.
Hubris. Which is, a fancy word for arrogance, but she defines it very specifically.
She does. She defines it as an excessive confidence that leads you to believe you can do no wrong. And it creates what she calls a closed-loop focus.
Which goes right back to that CEO who couldn't remember being wrong.
It's confirmation bias on steroids. If you have hubris, you are not listening for information. You are listening for affirmation. You're scanning for people who agree with you. Anything that contradicts your worldview just gets filtered out as wrong.
You're only tuned into the radio station that plays the song. You're right.
And that is so dangerous because the world changes, the market shifts. And if you're still listening to that same old station, you are going to drive right off a cliff.
Which brings us to barrier number 3. And this one seems almost innocent, but Fay says it's deadly. Boredom with detail.
The big picture trap. Leaders love to pride themselves on being visionaries. They don't want to get into the weeds. They delegate the details.
But I have to play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't that just good management? A CEO shouldn't be micromanaging everything.
That's true, but there's a huge difference between micromanaging and understanding the mechanics of your own business. Fay warns that when leaders get bored with the granular stuff, they tune out. They delegate the understanding. And that's where the devil lives.
So if you delegate understanding the details, you also delegate the ability to spot the fatal flaw.
You got it. When your attention level drops because you're bored, you miss that one tiny, faint signal that something is seriously wrong in the engineering, or the customer feedback, or the code.
So you put the three together. Impatience, so you're moving too fast. Hubris, you think you're already right. And boredom, you're ignoring the details. That is a recipe for absolute disaster.
It's the perfect storm, and the result is what Fay calls a deaf leadership culture. Or, maybe more visually, the ostrich effect.
Head in the sand.
Total head in the sand, just expecting the problem to disappear because you refuse to look at it.
And this isn't just theory. Fay brings the receipts. She lists this whole catalog of catastrophes caused by deaf leadership. And these aren't small mistakes.
No, these are legacy institutions being destroyed. The scale is just staggering. She points to the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster in 1986.
Classic case study.
It is. The engineers knew. The data about the O-rings failing in the cold was right there. Johnny was in the room screaming, "There's a fire in the kitchen."
Yeah.
But management had hubris and impatience. They had a schedule to keep. They didn't listen to the data, and 7 people died.
She also brings up Nokia. I mean, I remember when Nokia was the phone market. They were untouchable.
And then between 2010 and 2013, they just fell off a cliff. Why? Most likely hubris. They were the kings. They couldn't hear the market screaming for touchscreens and apps. They stopped listening to their customers because they thought they knew better.
And then there's Knight Capital Group. This one is terrifying. Fay notes they lost $440 million.
In 30 minutes.
Half an hour. That's just insane.
That's the speed of modern failure. They had a trading algorithm that just it went completely rogue. The signals were there, but the system and the people managing it weren't effectively checking the inputs. When you combine that kind of speed with low listening, you can vaporize $500 million before you're done with your coffee.
She also lists the Ford Edsel, Volkswagen's Dieselgate, the massive NHS IT system failure in the UK, and even points to NEOM in Saudi Arabia as a project to watch for these signs right now.
Which proves this isn't a tech problem or a government problem, it's a human problem. Whether it's 1957 with the Edsel or 2015 with VW, the pattern is identical. Leaders stop listening to reality because it conflicts with their ego or their goals.
It is heavy stuff. But we did promise a way out. We're not just here to list failures. Fay is very, very clear about one thing. Listening is a learnable skill.
And that is the silver lining, isn't it? You aren't just born a good listener or a bad listener. It's a muscle. You can actually train it.
Fay mentions her own leadership program, Liberating Greatness, where she focuses on what she calls listening with empathy and heightened sensory acuity.
That phrase, sensory acuity, is so important.
It sounds like a superpower.
In a business context, it kind of is. It just means tuning in to more than the words. It's the tone, the pace, the hesitation. If a team member says, "Yeah, I think we can hit that deadline," but their voice drops and they look away.
The words say yes, but the sensory data says no.
Exactly. A deaf leader just hears the yes and moves on. A listening leader picks up on that hesitation and says, "You didn't sound very sure about that. What are you worried about?" That is sensory acuity. That is how you catch the fire before it brings the whole house down.
And to really value this, Fay proposes a cultural shift. She actually suggests creating a Listening Leader Award.
I love this idea. Walk into any big company. You see awards for top sales, innovator of the year, best presentation. They're all output awards.
Why don't we have an award for the person who listened the best?
Because listening feels invisible. You can't see it happen, but you can absolutely see the results. The listening leader is the one whose team didn't lose the $440 million. They're the one whose team feels safe enough to bring up bad news early.
Fay argues this shift from an output leader to an input leader is the bridge from being ordinary to outstanding.
But it requires a real change in intent. You have to walk into a room with the intent to be changed by what you hear. If your only goal is to win the argument, you've already lost the chance to learn anything.
So let's wrap this up. We've talked about deaf leadership. We've covered the barriers, impatience, hubris, boredom. What's the one big thing you want people to take away from Fay's work?
I think it's to stop viewing silence as a weakness. In our culture, especially in business, we think the person talking is the person in charge. Fay is telling us that the person who is truly listening is the one gathering the intelligence needed to actually win. Speaking is performance. Listening is learning.
And for those who want to go deeper on this, because we really only scratched the surface, the source again is Fay Niewiadomski and her book, decisions that matter. Rethink, reimagine, reset your life.
Yeah, highly recommended if you want to get into the how behind all this.
And I want to leave everyone with a challenge. It goes right back to that CEO from the beginning.
The one who couldn't remember being wrong.
Right. I want you, listening right now, to ask yourself that same question. When was the last time I was absolutely wrong about something?
And be honest with yourself. If someone asked you that right now, would you have an answer? Or would you just be met with that long, uncomfortable silence?
Because having an answer doesn't mean you're incompetent. It means you were listening. Thanks for diving in with us. See you next time.